Welcome to Coached Soul, a podcast for a better you. Your host, Steve Hudgens, is a licensed professional counselor, and your co-host, Julia Canton, is a therapeutic coach. Together, they discuss various topics, providing a different perspective on life and insight that you are not alone. On a non-emergency basis, you may contact them at area code 918-280-8690 or coachsoul.com to provide them with new topics, feedback, or to request an appearance on the show. And now, here's your host, Steve Hudgens.
Welcome back to the show. As I said last time, when we leave a cliffhanger, we need to follow through, because I don't like a show interrupted and you got to wait for the next week to hear what's going on. Christine, welcome back again.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for having me back.
You know, we talked a little bit about the book, about getting into my 2 cents of self-love. And we talked about a lot about your manifestations and things of the changes that you went through. And I think there's some key words that we need to hone in that can help people to understand how to love themselves and being able to get this dynamic out. One of the things I want to ask is, when it comes down to talking to other women, taking from what you've learned, what will you tell women today about how to love yourself? Because it just seems like most women are really down on themselves.
I think women struggle with that because we look at like what society views as how a woman should be. And I think we take a look at being the perfect mom, being the perfect wife, having a nice home, keeping it up. There's a lot of expectations. So much so that you're taking a look again on the outside. You're taking care of everybody. I have a child. I had children with extra needs. I adopted 2 children that were in foster care. And then I had a child on the autism spectrum. And now I want to make sure that before I go any further, they have been a blessing. I am blessed beyond measure. And with that comes extra challenges. And you have extra responsibilities. There's extra doctor's appointments. There's extra visits. There's it's all encompassing. And I was also working full time and trying to maintain a marriage. So making sure that you're taking care of yourself during the parenting is crucial, and making sure that, you know, if there's anybody that's listening, making sure that our parents and that are busy, making sure you can answer this question: do I know who I am? Do I know what lights me on fire? What are my passions? Am I pursuing those passions? If the answer is no, then there's some work to do, some inner work to do.
You just really opened up Pandora's box. And that's one of the questions I typically ask in therapy session, because I look at, well, who are you? Without assigning outside labels of a wife, a mom, a worker, that type of thing. And you're right. What sets you on fire? And a lot of people don't know, men and women. And so I try to start there to help them to try to figure out who they are. Because my philosophy is, how can you do productive therapy if you don't understand who you are or where you are? And then from there, I kind of ripple effect out to try to figure out how to put the good in and helping them to identify who they are. And then I try to take the junk out that they're struggling with. So it's a parallel type therapy that I try to do to help people. But when you think about your journey and the inspiration of working with kids, you do seem to get kind of lost within the special needs kids that you were working with. You're working, you're a mom, you're married. What would you do to tell women about how to have self-care? Because majority of the women that I'm seeing in therapy, they are having difficulty and they feel guilty. So instead of taking from a man's perspective of how to help, what would you say from a woman's perspective, how to help them not feel so guilty?
So what I did, first of all, and we talked about setting boundaries. So I set boundaries. I'm like, my children they need extra bedtime, because if they don't have extra bedtime, I looked it up to see how much they needed. I looked at the full amount, how much they would need. Well, they woke up early, they went to bed early. And when they went to bed early, that was my time. Then I would know that they would need to wake up. Like if, on the weekends, I would figure out when they would typically wake up. I woke up earlier. I gave myself downtime. I would drink my coffee. I would read. I would sit down in my favorite chair and get ready to embrace the day, whatever that might look like, because it could look kind of interesting, on some days. I mean, some days we were going to the ball field, all day. Some days it was, being around the house, but making sure that, that the children were engaging properly, and making sure, because I didn't put them on technology. So we had one of those old computers, like those little towers, and I only let them go on for half an hour. So the three of them had to share their time. And so, because I didn't want technology to be like what they were doing, so I really cut that out. So that meant that mom was on full duty to make sure that I was, watching them.
But at the same time, you say, well, I got to take my time. What did you do with your husband? Did you lock him up and say, this is my time?
So our times were different. Now I'm divorced that would be my ex-husband.
Okay.
So that probably, so I don't know. He probably was still sleeping or whatever, but right now I was like, I just got to work on my time, because my time was important. And I really like my time just to be my time, because I didn't like to talk in the morning, especially like when I knew it was going to be more hectic. I just needed to ground myself and center myself.
When you think about my time, sometimes we can feel guilty because we feel like we got to do, or we take on this big, huge itch of people pleasing. And it's about people pleasing because I don't want to disappoint you. I don't want to change things. But to me, part of self-love is recognizing where you are, taking those moments of time out. And you being a school teacher, could you think about the accuracy of this statement? Is I always believed in looking at with my own kids. If I spent at least 30 minutes with them, it seemed 3 hours to them. What do you think?
Yes, I think so. Probably. Yeah. I mean, I wonder, time goes by so fast. And the other thing is with the self-care, when we practice self-care, we are giving others the best of ourselves, not the leftovers. So when we spend time with them, we are engaging with them. We are able to talk with them. We're not spent. If I woke up when they woke up, I'd be giving them my leftovers. And I did not want to give them my leftovers and be, you know, short on patience and that kind of thing. Are we all short on patience sometimes? Yeah, I wasn't perfect. I tried to be the best parent that I could be. That also included that if I was getting frustrated, I gave myself a timeout. I would tell my children, Mom needs a timeout. And I would say, I will be back in about 5 minutes. And I would sit down in a chair, and they knew that was Mom was taking a break. So that way I could also model to my children that everybody needs breaks. breaks are okay to take, and you're given permission to do that for yourself.
Was that difficult in giving yourself that permission that I need to take it?
No, because I was being a responsible adult. I was not getting frustrated. And when I got a little bit, could feel myself getting frustrated. I wasn't ready to yell. I could feel it like working up, and I didn't want to do anything that I would regret later. So I would just take a break and just take a few minutes and do my deep breaths. Plus, when you have children that have extra needs, you want to make sure you are modeling that behavior so they can see what adults do when they get frustrated, that they can go take a break in their room, they can move away from each other, they don't have to engage.
You used a therapeutic term. Take some deep breaths. Did you at any point in time have any kind of interaction with therapy in the past?
So I gotta tell you, I love therapy. I love reading therapy books. I wanted to be a teacher.
Okay.
And then my second career I wanted to be was a psychologist. The problem was, I think my psychology book was really too boring. And so each time that I would read it, my head would go and I'd fall asleep. So I just couldn't get into it. So I'm like, you know what? If I can't get into like reading it, like, and in college, I was like, I don't know if I really want to like go down that field. But I have my background in special ed. I also have an emotionally handicapped endorsement. I also have listened to lots of things on like manifestation and mindset. And so I do a lot of my own professional development on my own.
That is part of self-love.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the same time, I look at it as when I do couples therapy, I approach the couple first and then get a couple sessions underneath. And then I'll break it off into 1 week it'll be him, 1 week will be her, and then back together as a couple. Because I believe there should be a balance in doing therapy so that one is not outgrowing the other. And being able to have a nice balance of it's not about communication. I talk to people and they say, what's the problem with relationships breaking? Oh, it's a lack of communication. And then you go see a therapist, and what do they typically treat? The symptom, communicate. Let's learn how to communicate. And I'm like, how did you get together in the first place? You communicated. So I'm like, it's not about communication. It's fear-based. Some of the fear from the past is coming to the surface because we're triggering one another. And because their triggers are there, we're hurting each other. And so we go for a tit for tat for pain until all of a sudden we're not talking anymore because of fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of the reaction that's going to take place.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So it's interesting how you are developing yourself, and then all of a sudden, here comes Misty Lee and a bunch of other opportunities coming at you. Is there more books going to come from you later on?
So I'm writing currently Creating Harmony in a Classroom. So to help teachers and to help their students. And as you would say, I guess there is a component of self-love, because talking about boundaries, talking about how the importance of picking the correct group of circle. And so those types of elements will be in it, as well as some special ed and looking at inclusion from the onset, instead of looking at it once you get your class list and going, oh, this is who I have on it. So building for inclusion to begin with. And when I talk about building for inclusion, I mean purposefully including others. So literally putting yourself in their shoes, whether it is sitting down in their spot. If you can't do it, if you can't visualize it, then put yourself physically in that child's place. Close your eyes. What do you hear? take note. And then whatever you hear, if you have a child in the autism spectrum in your classroom, because that's what you're doing, you're building it for on the onset. Whatever sound that you hear, you've got to remember that they're going to be hearing that sound in addition to all the other students talking. So if that sound is here and the children's sound is like up here, they're going to be, that sound matches up here. Because they can't decipher between the sounds. So it all becomes like the same meaning. That's why they have to cover their ears. It's just way too much. And then you have another component. You have the sensory for your eyes. What do you see? So I do like a farmhouse style, because farmhouse, there's, it's like black and gray, and I have some white tubs. Well, everything kind of blends, it just kind of fades away into the background. And then I put my bold colors, because I teach younger children. I put all the bright colors in my, like the stools or on the floor. So when they're looking around, it's pretty neat and organized. I don't like things on the counters as much as possible. It's hard sometimes, but at least having like larger sections just totally cleared away. The other thing is that you got to watch for the lights. They flicker. So I found out that my lights have dimmers, so I put them on dimmers. And then if you put on the task lights, and it will cut down the flickering, it kind of cancels it out. So if my children are getting headaches, that's the other thing that I do. One child says that they have a headache, I tell the class that a student has a headache, so we're going to try to turn down the lights, and I do check-ins on that student. And the rest of the class knows that we take into consideration what other people need.
So teaching them mindfulness.
Oh, yes. And being respectful and understanding that not everybody has the same needs. So sometimes I have children that need to have water. So not everybody needs water. Sometimes, they need water for health. And so some children are able to have it with them. And, they also know that not everybody, some children need to sit down on a chair, if they hurt their leg, or something like that, they're going to need to sit down on a chair. It doesn't mean everybody else, there's times and places for different things, but having compassion for others is extremely important.
You're getting into a whole new ball of wax. Especially with our society. I keep talking about this on our podcast, that although we may have difference of opinion, it doesn't mean that we go our separate ways and write each other off. I look at, we can take our differences of opinion, build on those things, and become better based upon our two opinions, because out of our self-discovery, we find something even better outside of ourselves. So I like what you're sharing. And when it comes down to, I'm trying to pull this all back in together, because we can go into a lot of rabbit trails, and I could chase them all day long. and great topics and everything. But I do want to circle back around of, here you are, of telling yourself how to be mindful, taking these deep breaths. When it comes down to all these tasks that a woman has to do, I try to tell men in therapy that they need to step it up too. That just because you're tired, she's tired. And if you want more time in the bedroom, then get in and help her. Cook dinner. Be able to be mindful about more than just yourself. So I heard you say that divorce. Are you currently divorced now?
So I remarried.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going on 9 years. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So here are things that are coming out for you. Again, my 2 cents of self-love is coming out, and here you are into a blended family. What would you tell women going into from a single parent, that you have to take time for you, and now you're remarried? What would you say to women of, again, how do I have a sense of love and not feel that I'm having to be robbed from it from another person?
So my children, I only had two children in the house at that time. So, and they were also older. Um, so with self-love, and I guess for me, that divorce, it knocked me down. It knocked me
Mm-hmm.
down hard. And I ended up rebuilding it back up. And I think just making sure that you know who you are and keeping that at the forefront, making sure that you know what lights you on fire. So at the time of the divorce, I didn't know. I didn't know who I was as a person. I had no idea. So I had a lot of work to do. And so I just kept on leveling it up, leveling it up, leveling it up. So that's what I've been doing each year and every single day, trying to make sure that I am better than the day before.
So it's real easy for you to say, hey, this is where I've been, this is what I've done. Let's flush that out a little bit for our listeners to try to have a better understanding when it comes down for women who feel like they feel defeated. They feel like they let their own self down. I mean, you've been there.
Yeah.
What it was it that helped you to kick in that motivation that I'm not going to do this again to myself?
So for me, there's been things in the life even before that, like um the diagnosis of my daughter. So, or there's been some head injuries. There's been, different things. My stepfather passed away. There's been hard knocks. So what I would do is I would allow myself just a little bit of time to grieve or to get my mind set again. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be to grieve, but just to wrap my brain around it. And what I realized that is that every single second, every single day that I cannot get myself in gear is less time that I have time to research, less time that I have to be proactive, less time that I can live. Because when you are not being there for yourself, you're not living your full life. So I think it's showing up for ourselves first and foremost
Did
is
you,
the most important part.
during that time frame, did you feel guilty?
Oh yeah, because okay, so first of all, I filed for the divorce, a divorce that I did not believe. I don't believe in divorce. I believe in working through things. So I filed the divorce, got an official divorce in 19 years and 11 months, right like a month ago, right before the 20th anniversary. So yeah, I felt guilty because I felt like it was going against my principles. My principle was is death, until death do you part. Um, and the funny thing is I still feel that way. I got remarried, but that's still something that that I believe in, sickness and health. And so that part was hard because I let myself down. And I let my children down in a way. But, there's sometimes there's things that are out of your control.
But even if you say you let yourself down, and I know sometimes women feel trapped, and so they feel like, okay, I need to be rescued, or I don't trust anymore. I can't. What helped you to pull out? Was it your faith, or was there somebody that came along to help mentor you? What was it that gets you to the spot that you're in now?
So great question. So what ended up happening, I've noticed in my life, and we didn't even talk about religion. So I've
Right.
noticed in my life whenever, because I moved around a lot, we didn't have the same churches, but whenever I was not that active in church or not that present, that my life was always out of kilter. And so whenever I put God at the center of my life, then things always fell into place. So one of the very first things that to kick myself to high gear was to find a better church for my family, because the church that I was at before, if there was an outburst, then everybody turned around. I didn't go to church. So I needed a church that was accepting and a loving atmosphere. So I ended up getting rebaptized shortly after my divorce. And I think that really, that was, I think, a very pivotal, very powerful time period to be able to get baptized as an adult, because you don't remember when you're an infant. So, yeah, so that's how that happened.
It's interesting because I can identify with some of this, because I grew up in a very legalistic type faith of a home where there wasn't much grace. And as I got older and things did a lot of pivotal changes for me. And in 2009, like you, I was baptized again and things started changing.
Yeah.
And just because one church is a certain way doesn't mean they're all this way. And I learned how to read and study and even have a degree in Bible and philosophy. It's helped me in the dynamics. Well, those who have known me in some of the podcasts that I have talked about, that God has been astronomical of helping things in my life to come to fruition. My near-death experience last year, now I'm alive. And it's caused this other domino effects that I'm living life and having fun. And it's just amazing what we can go through, but it's that transitional shift of learning how to love yourself.
Yes.
And so, Christine, I really appreciate our time. And there's so much rabbits we can go chase that we could probably make rabbit stew out of it. But for our listeners, I don't want to get in trouble with, the people who love animals. But I really enjoyed your aspect. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your part of the reasons of what has helped you to have self-love. And I'm hoping some women can find this beneficial for them. Until next time, have a great day and be blessed.
Thank you, Steve. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope to have you back next week. Until then, be safe and be kind.